Peace, brothers and sisters. This is Hua Qi. Thank God it is time again for our Bible reading. Let's continue to read Genesis 25. Today, we will start from verse 9. Abraham lived 175 years. He breathed his last and was gathered to his people. Verse 9. Isaac and Ishmael, his sons, buried him in the cave of Machpelah, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite, east of Mamre, the field that Abraham purchased from the Hittites. There Abraham was buried with Sarah his wife. In Genesis 23, Bible used entire chapter to describe how Abraham bought the cave of Machpelah, the field, and all the trees from Ephron. Machpelah means double portion. When Abraham buried Sarah, his intention was to be buried in the same cave one day. After he lived his life and died, his two sons, Isaac and Ishmael, buried him in the cave of Machpelah. The order of the sons recorded was Isaac first and then Ishmael. In fact, Ishmael was the firstborn, yet he was born of the servant girl Hagar. Isaac was a promised son. At his old age, Abraham had 6 sons from Keturah. While he was still living, he sent those sons east. The one buried with Abraham was his first wife, Sarah. Though he had 2 concubines in his life, Hagar and Keturah, Abraham knew from the beginning that only the one born from Isaac can be his heir and inherit God's promises. Verse 11. After the death of Abraham, God blessed Isaac his son, and Isaac settled at Beer-lahai-roi. Abraham lived in Hebron for the most part of his life. He once was in Beersheba. However, after Sarah died, Abraham moved back to Hebron. Isaac lived in Beer-lahai-roi near Beersheba. Beer means well. Lahai-roi means the living one watches. Thus, Beer-lahai-roi means the living one that's seeing me. Isaac's life rested in God's watching. Verse 12. These are the generations of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar, the Egyptian, Sarah's servant, born to Abraham. When Abraham was 86 years old, Ishmael was born. After that, God stopped appearing to him for 13 years. When he was 100 years old, Isaac was born. When Isaac was weaned, Ishmael was laughing at him. Under Sarah's persuasion, Abraham got rid of Hagar and Ishmael. When Hagar and Ishmael ran out of water in the desert, God heard them. He sent an angel to open the eyes of Hagar and saw the well. God promised that Ishmael would also become a great nation. Let's read verse 13. These are the names of the sons of Ishmael, named in the order of their birth. Nebaioth, the firstborn of Ishmael, and Kedar, Adbeel, Mibsam, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadad, Tema, Jetur, Nephish, and Kedemeth. These are the sons of Ishmael, and these are their names, by their villages and by their encampments, 12 princes according to their tribes. Sure enough, Ishmael became a great nation according to God's promise. He had 12 sons, whom became 12 princes according to their tribes. They were the ancestors of Arabs. They were Abraham's descendants by flesh. Though connected to Abraham, they had no share in the blessings and promises that God gave to Abraham. In the later days, in Israel's history, they had always been the problems to Israelites. Until today, 4,000 years later, in the Middle East, only Israel inherited the God-given promises to Abraham. All other surrounding Arabic nations were in fact Abraham's descendants as well. Some were born of Ishmael, some were from the 6 sons of Keturah from further east. The reason why the Middle East is so complicated is that among Arabs, the blood and his histories had been changed over time. Thus, they had a lot of internal conflicts. The only thing to unite them, besides Islam religion, is Israelites, the common enemy. The Middle East becomes the main benchmark of world peace. When there is peace in Middle East, there is peace in the world. When there is war in Middle East, there will be endless wars in the world. All these are in the hands of God. God is the one writing the history. He is the eternal God. When Abraham produced the descendants through his flesh, it did not look that bad back then. He also took proper care of it. He kept Isaac in Canaan, but sent away all other sons born from his concubine eastwards. However, after 4,000 years, this became the root cause of world turbulence. This is hard for man to imagine, yet it is still in the hands of God. Verse 17. These are the years of the life of Ishmael, 137 years. He breathed his last and died and was gathered to his people. They settled from Havilah to Shur, which is opposite Egypt in the direction of Assyria. He settled over against all his kinsmen. These are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Chapter 25, as the closing chapter for Abraham's life, it recorded 3 family lines. First, he recorded the 6 sons from Keturah and the descendants and their dwelling places. Then he recorded Ishmael from Hagar and the 12 princes from Ishmael and their dwelling places. Third, he recorded the life of Isaac. Bible told us again and again that the God we worship is God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God of Jacob. It indicated every Christian in his lifetime needs to have these 3 different experiences: Abraham's experience, Isaac's experience, Jacob's experience. Thus, Abraham's experience was the beginning experience of a Christian who is starting to follow God. There were so many beginnings in Abraham's life. He was the first called one, the first river crosser, the first one entered Canaan, the first one who followed God by faith throughout his life. He lived in a tent all his life. Every time when God gave a special leading, he would build an altar and offer sacrifices. He lived a life of dedication. We mentioned before that dedication is a transfer of ownership. This happens in us step by step and moving forward. Through Abraham, we see his lifetime dedicated path, from the status to existence to aim to toil and to the transition of the connotation. The peak of his dedication was the offering of his promised son Isaac. Although it was very high up, it was not rich enough. In Abraham's experience, there was too much flesh in his toil. His first son Ishmael was the combination of flesh and the law. The second son Isaac was born of grace and became the son of the promise. After Sarah died and grace was lost, Abraham again produced 6 sons through his flesh. Thus, we see that Abraham's life did not mature. His connotation was not rich enough. He was a man of great talent. There were so many beginnings start from him. However, there was too much flesh involved in the process. Thus, from chapter 25, the Bible recorded the life of Isaac. His life made up of what Abraham fell short. He inherited and enjoyed everything. He seemed to do nothing in his lifetime, unlike Abraham, who had so many beginnings. All his life, he seemed to rest in the inheritance that was given by God to Abraham. He was a man who can rest in the promise of God. From the outside, it seemed that he didn't do anything. However, because of his rest, God's grace was shown through him. He also went through the transition in status, existence, aim, and toil. However, because he could enjoy life, his connotation was richer than Abraham. A person's maturity is manifested in the richness of his connotation, and the rich connotation is shown through the blessings he is to others. He is able to bless others. In Abraham's life, he was the first one received the blessings from Melchizedek. Melchizedek was God's high priest. In Abraham's life, we don't see him blessing others. Isaac's experience went further than Abraham's in this respect. When Isaac was old, he knew he must bless his two sons. This was recorded in Genesis 27. However, Isaac's life was to enjoy. When he was about to bless his son, his intention was for his firstborn Esau. However, he was tricked by his wife and his younger son Jacob. Thus, his blessing went to the wrong person. However, he went further than Abraham. He knew to bless others. Even though he was not very clear in his blessing during the process, after knowing being cheated by Jacob for the blessings, Isaac trembled violently. In Genesis 27, verse 33, he said, "Who was it then that shunted game and brought it to me? I ate it just before you came, and I blessed him, and indeed he will be blessed." He realized that once he had blessed, then he would not take it away. Thus, the younger son, Jacob, became the blessed one. Through Abraham, we learned to have a beginning, to be able to be called, and to be able to follow. Through Isaac, we learned to be able to accept and to enjoy all sorts of supplies from God. Through Jacob, we learned to accept the makings God is doing in us. Jacob's life was full of romantic and sufferings. However, at his old age, he became the richest follower of God in connotation. He was good at blessing others. In chapter 47, because of the famine in Canaan, Jacob had to go to Egypt to Joseph. He was a lonely old man. Yet, when meeting with the Pharaoh in Egypt, whom was the most powerful king in the world at that time, he did not feel lowly at all. Genesis 47, verse 7. Then Joseph brought his father Jacob in and presented him before Pharaoh. After Jacob blessed the Pharaoh, it had always been that those who are in higher position bless those who are lower. Though Jacob went to Pharaoh, he did not feel he was lowly because he was the blessed one, God's prince. In his old age, he also blessed Joseph's two sons. His blessings were totally different from his father Isaac. Isaac was tricked to bless his younger son. Jacob blessed Joseph's two sons. Genesis 48, verse 17, when Joseph saw his father placing his right hand on Ephraim's head, he was displeased. So he took hold of his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. Manasseh was the firstborn. Ephraim was the secondborn. In Joseph's mind, the firstborn should receive the double blessing. Thus, Manasseh should receive the blessing from Jacob's right hand. Joseph thought Jacob misplaced his hands, thus wanted to correct him. Verse 18, Joseph said to him, No, my father, this one is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He too will become a people, and he too will become great. Nevertheless, his younger brother will be greater than he, and his descendants will become a group of nations. When giving blessings to Joseph's two sons, though he could not see very well, his eyes in his mind were very clear. He knew Ephraim would become great. Thus he crossed his arms and placed his right hand on Ephraim's head. Genesis 49. Jacob blessed his 12 sons. Those blessings became the prophecies for the 12 tribes of Israel. At his old age, his connotation was very rich. He was one with God. Whatever he said became God's will. What he said became the destiny for the 12 tribes of Israel. God is for sure the God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God of Jacob. Let's pray. Lord, thank you. Following your leading, we just went through Abraham's entire life. He was the faith of our forefather. We will have to go through the path he took. However, by the time he died, his life was not mature. Thank you for putting us in the New Testament. We not only have the examples of Abraham, but also have Isaac and Jacob. We ask you, continue to bless us for reading your words daily, so your abundant blessings will flow through your words to our daily needs. Help me to live a life pleasing to you. In Jesus' name, amen.